Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Coach Letsinger's Learning Lab, a podcast where teachers discuss critical issues. This episode, we're going to be talking about teacher burnout, defining it, diagnosing it, and detoxing it. I'm joined here this morning by my special guest, Blake Hargett. And with that being said, Blake, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me on. I am an assistant professor of early childhood education and literacy at one of our local regional universities here. I spend most of my time teaching undergraduate courses in literacy and early childhood development. I also live here in the area. My wife's a teacher. My kids are in preschool here, and we are an education-centered family.
That's awesome, Blake. That's so cool, dude, because my wife and I are both teachers as well. Because coming from your background, just from elementary education, early childhood, and now working in higher ed, that's awesome, dude. So hopefully we get some cool perspectives this morning on teacher burnout. With that being said, I've got a few questions for you this morning. Speaking of defining teacher burnout, this is our first section of the podcast this morning. Question I have for you is, when you hear teacher burnout, what does that actually mean to you? Not the textbook definition, but like, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Teacher burnout is one of these topics that is getting a lot of publicity today. I think it's because there's such a negative discourse around it.
Yeah.
When we think about defining it, we think about it in terms of how people perceive it and how it's felt. Because burnout is the result of not one single variable, but it's multiple variables culminating together to create this horrible negative feeling that so many teachers have.
Yeah.
So a lot of teachers will experience job-related stress. That's to be expected. In fact, roughly twice, there's twice the likelihood of feeling stress in a teaching job related to other areas, other professions for normal working adults. So when we think about burnout, we think about it in terms of either that it's a result of poor performance, consistent poor performance, or that a lot of times, it's a personal reflection issue.
Yeah, for sure.
That there's no longer a boundary between the personal and the work life, and that things that are happening in the work life are bleeding over into the personal life.
Yeah, for sure. So speaking of, with your position in your university job, you mainly deal with pre-service teachers, correct?
Right.
So for pre-service teachers or first, second year teachers that are just getting started in their careers, what are some signs that they might be heading towards burnout, even if they don't really realize it? Because in my process of picking out this topic for this podcast and through the work that I've done this semester, a group of article that I read from this group of authors from the University of Calgary up in Canada, Emily Williams and a bunch of them, they actually share that 1 out of 4 teachers actually wind up leaving the profession within the first 4 years. So what are some signs that pre-service teachers, rookie teachers, might be heading towards burnout, even if they don't realize it yet?
Yeah, that's a great idea. There was a meta-analysis that I read recently from the Environmental Research and Public Policy Journal, and it focused on the variables that could potentially lead to burnout. And when we think about what I'm about to say, these are things that we consider to be hegemonic in education. So you feel you have to do these to get ahead, or you believe that everyone else is doing these, so you have to do it too. So it could be that you are not giving yourself a break on the weekends. It could be that you're bringing your work home with you to do after school. It could be that you are over-reliant on caffeine, or that you're no longer sleeping well, or that you will sometimes feel very disconnected from your job, and that you feel like you're going through the motions.
Yeah.
So these are things that, like I said, are not one-off circumstances. They're the result of many other things that have happened. And there is a way to prevent it, and I'm very hopeful that a lot of people are doing those things now, but unfortunately, and this is me speaking from my own experience, I used to do some of these things too. And until someone pointed it out to me, I believe that was going to lead me down a road to burnout. Because everyone does these things, and you think you're supposed to, like showing up early to work before the janitors and the principals get there, no one's going to see that, and that's not going to mean anything to your career. It's going to leave you more tired during the day, and it's going to make you sleep worse at night, but that's not going to benefit you in your job.
Yeah, and especially, I don't really think some of the things that you just mentioned, like showing up early, yes, we want to do that as educators because we want to set the example for our students and things, but
Sure.
how is that really benefiting our students' learning?
Exactly.
When we're showing up? Because the goal of education, the goal of our job is to really push our students to higher heights, right?
Right. And to me, that just shows that either you have a time management issue or that you have not appropriately scaled your expectations for your students.
Absolutely. So with that being said, let's move into this next section of our podcast this morning, diagnosing teacher burnout. We've kind of defined it, just the mental load of all the things that go along with teaching. It's stressors. It's taking our work home, not having really personal time management skills. That's where I feel like a lot of teachers really struggle, especially in their early years of their career. But if we're diagnosing the problem, what are the biggest causes that you see causing teacher burnout right now? Is it workload? Is it behavior issues of students? Is it just a lack of support from admin, pay? What's really driving it? Because one of the articles, another one of the articles I read this semester is from David Marshall and a group of his co-authors. They actually shared, this is in crazy stat, that 76% of the teachers that were polled in their study in the years following COVID actually contemplated leaving the classroom. And these are veteran teachers. So really, Blake, got a question, just kind of rolling back to it. What, in your opinion, have you seen is the biggest cause that is driving teacher burnout right now? Workload, behavior, what is it in your opinion?
Yeah. I think ultimately something that we all crave as humans and we all crave as even employees is that we all need an advocate in some way. Teachers are advocates for their students, and employees need advocates too. And in the school building, in that space, a teacher's advocate is their admin.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have entered this interregnum of administrators who have degrees or titles, but they don't have true leadership skills.
Oh man, that's good.
We, I believe, have gotten to a point to where we've become dependent on so many people who don't have those abilities to lead us that we forget we have to lead ourselves first.
That's good.
And really, if we want to get right down to the root of it, it is needing an advocate and someone who can lead you well, but it's also learning how to lead yourself well.
So, Blake, we're talking about leadership. Like, if there is one skill that young teachers need to kind of get in their wheelhouse, what would one leadership skill you'd recommend, or that you have recommended to the teachers that you're training up to jump into the profession?
Yeah. It's something that I like to call graceful recovery, in the sense that you're never going to be perfect. There is no one person on this earth today who is perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes I might think I am, and sometimes I think I do things really well, but I'm inevitably going to make mistakes. And if you enter any profession believing that you're going to do everything perfectly, then you will absolutely feel disconnected from it. You will have this unnatural perception of what your job is supposed to be. So viewing it with the sense that you're going to make mistakes, but it's all about how you recover from those, and that's what makes the difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Not only for you, but also for your students, right? We want our students to know that just like them, we are going to fail too. And if we can display graceful recovery, even for our youngest learners, I taught kindergarten and first grade, and I failed every single day, whether it was in a lesson or in a conversation or picking a book. And anyway, you'd make tons of mistakes, and until you display graceful recovery, your students aren't going to be able to do that for themselves.
Yeah, for sure.
So
that's
it's a
good.
cyclical process. If you display recovery for them, then you're more likely to forgive yourself too.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I carry with Blake, and because I actually spent a year, because you're in the early childhood realm, I'm actually in secondary. And what's really kind of crazy about my career, when I first moved to the school that I'm at now, currently, my first role in that school was the ISS teacher. So I was in charge of a lot of discipline. I handled a lot of just students who came to me for breaking the rules. A lot of it was cell phone policies. Other times it was vaping, or thankfully we didn't have any fights. But it was one of those things that I had really good conversation with them, and I defined this idea of excellence in my noggin, because I had to tell them that, guys, you're not perfect. You're with me. You've made a bad decision. You're not perfect. Get over it. So a lot of kids who struggle with perfectionism, a lot of teachers who struggle with perfectionism, it's this idea that we don't want to pursue perfection. We want to pursue excellence. And it's one of those things that, like, I kind of came up with this own definition in my head during my time as ISS teacher at my current school, that excellence is being better today than you were yesterday, every single day. It's just constantly improving. Yeah. So it's one of those things that I really think is so important for young teachers to kind of get their bearings in themselves and kind of understand that it's okay for me to mess up, but it's not okay for me to keep making the same mistakes over and over and over. Let's work on getting better, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
As we jump into teacher burnout here, another thing I wanted to ask you about Blake, is how do we detox it? So we've defined it. We know what it is. We've diagnosed it. We kind of said what the main problem is really just kind of time management, just not really knowing where our leadership is and having advocates in our schools. But on a bigger scale, let's kind of detox this system level wide. On a bigger scale, what should schools or policymakers be doing differently if we're serious about actually keeping teachers? Because one of the biggest things about burnout is retention, right? One of the articles that I read this semester too talks about it's just so neat because it's actually from a pair of authors from West Alabama, that they talk about the importance of admin and how crucial admin are to keeping the culture of their buildings up. So to you, Blake, what should policymakers, what should schools be doing on a system-wide basis to help prevent teacher burnout?
Yeah, that's great. I'm reminded of my days of being a fresh teacher, and my mother was a teacher, and I knew that burnout was real. I'd seen it happen. I remember being a student in elementary school, and I would move up a grade level, and I would come back to school, and my teacher from last year wouldn't be there. She left, and it's something that I think we have to acknowledge. We have to acknowledge it as a system, that teachers are being burnt out because we're failing to support them. Mm-hmm. And unless you view employee wellness as a priority, then you're going to continue to have these negative impact results.
Yeah, for sure.
So something that we can do, like I said, is we can acknowledge that it's real, but a lot of it comes down to establishing what's called the Pareto principle, and it's the belief that 80% of your returns come from 20% of your input. And so if you concentrate your efforts in a way that you are not trying to do everything all at once, and that you are focusing on maybe one or two things at a time and to make them really, really well, I think that's going to benefit a lot of people, because so many teachers enter the profession wanting to do everything right on day one. Mm-hmm. And they will work for hours and hours and hours and hours trying to plan the right lessons, get the right books, find the right graphic organizers to use, and they end up with nothing more than a tired mind and an exhausted body.
Yeah, for sure.
Because your students aren't worried about that. Mm-hmm. They just want to know that you love them and you care about them. So if we can really step back and almost take a strategic limitation principle there, believing that you need to isolate a few things at a time and work on those and make them well, I think that's going to benefit a lot of people.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, Blake. And one final question, just to kind of wrap up. For somebody who's listening right now and who's in their first, second, third, maybe fourth, fifth year teaching, who's getting started in their careers, what is one final piece of advice you'd give them to make sure they're preventing burnout?
Yeah. I think something that is going to be beneficial to teachers, but also to anyone in any profession, is understanding that your job is your job.
Yeah.
And that is not who you are. Who you are is you are a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, an uncle, an aunt, a brother, sister. That's who you are. Your job is just what you do from 8 to 3.
Absolutely. That's so good. And realizing to separate professional life from personal life, that's such a great idea. And one thing that I would have to say, just my personal advice to young teachers, is just never ever forget why they got into profession to begin with, because you have to love the kids more than you love the content.